My brother stood up at Thanksgiving dinner, wine glass raised high, and announced to the entire family that I was the reason our parents couldn't afford a decent retirement. 23 people, all eyes on me. He said I was a cautionary tale, a warehouse worker at 32, with nothing to show for it but calloused hands and an empty bank account. He said maybe if I'd applied myself like he did, I wouldn't be living in a glorified storage unit. The table erupted in laughter. My mother looked down at her plate. My father cleared his throat and said nothing. And me, I sat there fork in hand and let every word land exactly where he intended. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 3 days earlier, I'd signed the paperwork to acquire 68% of his company. Not just a stake, not just shares, control. And in 72 hours, he'd walk into his office and find out exactly who he'd been mocking all these years. The thing about being invisible is that people forget you're even in the room. They stop measuring their words. They stop pretending. And over time, you stop being a person to them. You become a reference point, a punchline, a convenient example of what not to become. That's what I'd been to my family for the last decade. Not Daniel. Not even Danny like they used to call me when we were kids. Just the guy who never quite figured it out. Thanksgiving at the Harrison household was always held at my parents' place, a sprawling colonial in the suburbs of Richmond with a wraparound porch and enough square footage to host a small wedding. My mother spent 3 days preparing. My father spent 3 days complaining about the cost, and Marcus spent 3 days making sure everyone knew he was paying for most of it. That was the dynamic. That was how it had always been. I pulled up in my truck around 2 in the afternoon. It was an old Chevy, reliable but ugly, with a dent in the passenger door from when I'd backed into a loading dock 4 years ago. The driveway was already crowded. Marcus's Tesla sat closest to the house, sleek and black, still wearing that new car smugness. Beside it was my cousin Jeff's Range Rover, my Aunt Linda's Lexus, and a handful of other vehicles that screamed success in all the ways mine didn't. I sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the wheel, staring at the house through the windshield. The windows glowed warm with light. I could see shadows moving inside, hear the faint hum of conversation and laughter drifting out into the cold November air. For a second I thought about turning around, just driving away. Spending Thanksgiving at a diner somewhere off the highway with a plate of mediocre turkey and strangers who didn't know my name. But I didn't. I grabbed the bottle of wine I'd brought, a mid-range red that I knew would be compared unfavorably to whatever Marcus brought, and headed toward the door. My mother answered before I even knocked. She had that frantic energy she always got when hosting, the kind that made her hug you too quickly and talk too fast. "Daniel, all good, you're here. Come in, come in. Everyone's already started on appetizers. Marcus brought this incredible brie. You have to try it. Here, let me take that. Oh, honey, you didn't have to bring anything. But thank you. Go say hello to your father. He's in the living room." I stepped inside. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon, a smell that should have been comforting, but instead just reminded me of every other Thanksgiving, where I'd felt like an outsider in my own family. The entryway was decorated with fall wreaths and small pumpkins arranged on a table that probably cost more than my rent. Coats were piled on the bench by the door. Voices echoed from deeper in the house. I made my way to the living room. My father sat in his usual chair, a leather recliner positioned in front of the television, which was playing a football game nobody was watching. He glanced up when I walked in, gave me a nod that could have meant anything, and returned his attention to his drink. "Hey Dad, Daniel, you made it." "Yeah, traffic wasn't too bad." "Good, good." That was it. That was the extent of our greeting. I'd learned a long time ago not to expect more. My father wasn't a cruel man, just a distant one, the kind who showed love through silence and the occasional nod of approval that you had to squint to see. I turned and headed toward the dining room, where the real gathering was happening. The table was already set, a long mahogany surface covered in fine china and crystal glasses that caught the light from the chandelier overhead. People clustered around it, picking at cheese and crackers, sipping wine, talking over each other in that loud, performative way families do when they're trying to prove how close they are. Marcus saw me first. He was standing near the head of the table, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of red wine that he swirled like he was auditioning for a sommelier position. He was 2 years older than me, taller by an inch, and had the kind of clean-cut look that made people trust him immediately. Dark hair, sharp jawline, tailored sweater that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't reach his eyes. Well, look who decided to show up. A few heads turned. My Aunt Linda looked over, her smile polite but thin. My cousin Jeff smirked into his drink. My Uncle Robert, Marcus's future father-in-law, raised his glass in a mock toast. Didn't think you'd make it. Marcus continued, louder now, playing to the room. Figured you'd be pulling a double shift or something. Nope. Got the day off. Generous of them. Must be nice working somewhere that actually closes on holidays. There it was. The first jab. Not even 5 minutes in. I should have been used to it by then, but it still landed. I forced a smile and moved toward the appetizer table, grabbing a cracker I didn't want just to have something to do with my hands. My cousin Ashley appeared beside me, younger by a few years, always a little kinder than the rest. She touched my arm lightly. Ignore him. He's been drinking since noon. I know. How have you been? Good. Busy. Still at the warehouse? Yeah. She nodded, and I could see the pity in her eyes, the same pity I'd seen in everyone's eyes for years. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't even intentional. But it was there. The unspoken belief that I'd settled, that I'd given up, that I was wasting whatever potential I might have had. The truth was more complicated. The truth always is. I'd been working at Peterson Logistics for 9 years. Started as a floor worker, loading and unloading trucks, inventory management, the kind of labor that left you sore at the end of every shift. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't impressive, but it was stable, and stability mattered when you were 23 and trying to figure out who you were outside of your family's expectations. What nobody knew, what I'd never told anyone, was that I'd been doing something else on the side. Something I started in the cramped one-bedroom apartment I rented on the south side of town, hunched over a laptop I'd bought second-hand, teaching myself everything I could about logistics software, supply chain optimization, and freight management systems. I wasn't just a warehouse worker. I was studying the industry from the inside, understanding its problems, identifying inefficiencies that cost companies millions. And 3 years ago, I'd started building something, a platform, a software solution designed to streamline inventory tracking and automate shipping logistics in ways the current systems couldn't. I called it FreightFlow. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a social media app or a game or anything that would make headlines. But it worked. And more importantly, it solved real problems for real businesses. I'd kept it quiet, worked on it late at night after my shifts, on weekends during lunch breaks. I'd taught myself coding, watched hundreds of hours of tutorials, read white papers until my eyes burned, and slowly over the course of 2 years, I'd built something functional, something valuable. Last year I'd started reaching out to small logistics companies, offering FreightFlow as a beta product. A few bit. They tested it. They liked it. Word spread. Within 6 months I had 12 clients. Within a year, I had 40. The revenue wasn't massive, but it was growing. Enough that I'd been able to quit my second job, the one stocking shelves at a grocery store 3 nights a week. And then 2 months ago, I got a call from an investment firm in Atlanta. They'd heard about freight flow. They wanted to talk. I flew down, met with them, explained what I'd built and where I thought it could go. They made an offer. A real offer. Enough capital to scale the platform, hire a development team, and expand into larger markets. But there was something else they mentioned. Something I hadn't been looking for but couldn't ignore once I heard it. Marcus's company, Greenway Solutions, was struggling. They specialized in supply chain consulting, helping mid-sized businesses optimize their logistics. On paper they were doing fine, but the firm had done their research. Greenway was bleeding clients, their systems were outdated, their contracts were expiring, and they didn't have the infrastructure to compete with newer, more agile competitors. The firm asked if I'd be interested in acquiring it, not as a hostile takeover, but as a strategic purchase, fold Greenway into freight flow, absorb their client base, modernize their systems, and position the combined entity as a serious player in the logistics space. I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds before I said yes. The paperwork took 6 weeks. Lawyers, accountants, due diligence, all of it happening quietly while I showed up to family dinners and listened to Marcus brag about his latest deal, his latest hire, his latest success. He had no idea. None of them did. And I didn't say a word. The acquisition closed 3 days before Thanksgiving. 68% ownership, majority control, effective immediately. Marcus would find out Monday morning when the board met and the new ownership structure was announced. I'd offered him a position, a senior consultancy role with a generous salary, because despite everything, I wasn't interested in humiliating him. I just wanted control of a company I knew I could fix. But standing there in my parents' dining room, watching him hold court, watching him perform, I couldn't help but feel a quiet, simmering satisfaction knowing what was coming. Dinner was called at 6. Everyone shuffled toward the table, jockeying for position, claiming seats with the kind of unspoken hierarchy that had existed for years. Marcus sat at one end, closest to my father. His fiancée, Rachel, sat beside him, pretty and polished, always smiling at the right moments. My mother fluttered around the table, making sure everyone had what they needed. I ended up near the middle, sandwiched between Ashley and my Uncle Robert, who smelled like bourbon and talked too loud. The food came out in waves: turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce, rolls still warm from the oven. It looked perfect. It always did. My mother had a gift for presentation, even if the actual meal was usually over-seasoned and slightly dry. Everyone filled their plates. Conversation hummed around the table, overlapping stories about work and vacations and home renovations. I ate quietly, answering when spoken to, nodding along when expected, otherwise content to let the noise wash over me. And then Marcus stood up. He didn't announce it. He just rose from his seat, glass in hand, and the table gradually fell silent. All eyes turned toward him. He had that look, the one he always got when he was about to make a speech, a mix of confidence and performative humility that he'd perfected over years of client meetings and boardroom presentations. "I just want to say a few words," he began, voice smooth and practiced. "First, thank you, Mom and Dad, for hosting us again. This house, this table, this family, it's what Thanksgiving is all about." Murmurs of agreement. My mother beamed. My father nodded. Marcus continued, "I've been thinking a lot lately about what it means to be successful, not just financially, but personally. Building something that lasts, creating value, making your family proud." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. I could see where this was going. I could feel it building. And I look around this table, and I see people who've worked hard, who've sacrificed, who've built lives they can be proud of. Jeff with his law practice, Linda with her real estate business, Dad with everything he accomplished before he retired. Another pause. His eyes scanned the table, landing briefly on each person before moving on. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And then they landed on me. And then there's Danny. The room shifted. It was subtle, but I felt it. The way conversations stopped mid-sentence. The way people leaned in slightly, anticipating something. Marcus smiled. Not cruel, but not kind either. Somewhere in between. I love my brother. I do. But I think he's a perfect example of what happens when you don't push yourself. When you settle for good enough, instead of striving for great. My chest tightened. I kept my face neutral, fork resting on the edge of my plate. He's been working at the same warehouse for what? 9 years now? 10? Loading trucks, moving boxes. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Honest work and all that. But at some point you have to ask yourself, is this really all I'm capable of? A few uncomfortable laughs. Ashley shifted beside me. My mother looked like she wanted to say something but didn't. Marcus wasn't done. I tried to help him, you know. Got him an interview at Greenway a few years back. Entry-level position. Nothing fancy, but he turned it down. Said he was happy where he was. He shook his head, a gesture of bewilderment. And now here we are. I'm running a company, building something real. And Danny's still punching a clock, living paycheck to paycheck, probably wondering why he can't afford to move out of that apartment. The room was silent now, completely silent. My Uncle Robert stared down at his plate. Jeff looked uncomfortable. Rachel touched Marcus's arm lightly, a signal to stop, but he ignored her. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm really not. But I think it's important to be honest. Danny's the reason our parents can't retire comfortably. He's the reason they're still working part-time, still worrying about bills. Because instead of stepping up, instead of building something, he chose the easy path. And that's on him. He raised his glass, so here's to making better choices. To ambition, to not settling for mediocrity. A few people reluctantly raised their glasses. Most didn't. The toast hung in the air like smoke, acrid and uncomfortable. Marcus sat down, looking satisfied, like he'd just delivered a TED talk. Rachel whispered something to him. He waved her off. I sat there staring at my plate, feeling the weight of 23 pairs of eyes on me, waiting to see if I'd respond, waiting to see if I'd defend myself. I didn't. I picked up my fork, took a bite of turkey, chewed slowly, and swallowed. And then I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I smiled, not a big smile, not a triumphant one, just a small, quiet smile that nobody but Ashley seemed to notice. Because in 72 hours, Marcus was going to walk into his office and learn that the warehouse worker he just humiliated in front of the entire family now owned his company. And I was going to be there to see his face when it happened. The rest of dinner passed in a fog of forced conversation and clinking silverware. People tried to move on, tried to steer the discussion towards safer topics like football scores and upcoming holiday plans, but the damage was done. The air felt heavier, charged with an awkwardness that no amount of polite laughter could dispel. I finished my meal mechanically, each bite tasteless despite the hours my mother had spent preparing it. Across the table, Marcus held court again, telling some story about a difficult client he'd won over with his charm and business acumen. People laughed at the right moments, nodded appreciatively, played their parts in the theater of family harmony. My mother caught my eye once. She looked worried, guilty even, but she didn't say anything. She never did. That was her way. Keep the peace. Don't make waves. Pretend everything was fine even when it clearly wasn't. After dinner, people migrated to different parts of the house. Some clustered in the living room around the football game. Others gathered in the kitchen, picking at leftovers and pouring more wine. I found myself on the back porch, alone, leaning against the railing and staring out at the darkened yard. The cold felt good, sharp and clean. It cut through the stuffiness of the house, the weight of the evening, the echo of Marcus's words still ringing in my ears. The door opened behind me. I didn't turn around. That was rough in there. It was Ashley. She came and stood beside me, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the chill. I shrugged. It's Marcus. That's what he does. Doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. We stood in silence for a moment. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The wind rustled through the bare trees at the edge of the property. For what it's worth, Ashley said quietly, I don't think you're a failure. I think you're doing exactly what you need to do. I looked at her. She was staring straight ahead, hands shoved in her pockets. Thanks. She nodded, then headed back inside, leaving me alone again with my thoughts. I stayed out there for another 20 minutes, watching my breath cloud in the cold air, thinking about the last 9 years. The early mornings, the late nights, the rejection emails from investors who didn't see the potential, the moments of doubt when I wondered if I was wasting my time, if Marcus was right, if I should have just taken that entry-level job at Greenway and climbed the corporate ladder like everyone expected. But I hadn't. I'd bet on myself instead, built something from nothing, turned an idea into a product into a business into something valuable enough that serious people with serious money wanted to invest in it. And now I own 68% of the company Marcus had spent the last 7 years building. The irony wasn't lost on me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my emails. There was one from my lawyer, confirming that all the paperwork had been filed and the acquisition was official. Another from the investment firm, congratulating me and outlining the next steps. And one from Helen, Greenway's CFO, a woman I'd spoken with several times during the due diligence process. She'd been professional but cautious, clearly uncertain about what this change in ownership would mean for her and the rest of the staff. I'd reassured her that I wasn't interested in gutting the company or making dramatic changes just for the sake of it. I wanted to stabilize it, modernize it, integrate it with freight flow in a way that made both entities stronger. She'd seemed relieved, but I could tell she was reserving judgment until she saw how I actually operated. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning at 9. All the key players would be there. Helen, the VP of Operations, the head of sales, a few senior consultants, and Marcus. He'd received a formal notification about the meeting, but no details about what would be discussed. Standard procedure for board meetings, nothing that would raise alarm bells. He had no idea what was coming. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and headed inside. The house had thinned out a bit. A few relatives had already left, citing early mornings or long drives. My parents were in the kitchen, my mother wrapping leftovers while my father loaded the dishwasher with the resigned efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. Marcus and Rachel were still in the living room. He was sprawled on the couch, tie loosened, looking relaxed and satisfied. She sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, occasionally showing him something that made him chuckle. I walked past them without saying a word, grabbed my jacket from the entryway, and prepared to leave. Heading out already. It was my mother. She'd followed me from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Yeah, long drive back. You barely ate anything. Let me pack you a plate. Mom, I'm fine. Daniel, please, let me do this. There was something in her voice, a pleading quality that had nothing to do with leftovers. I nodded, and she disappeared back into the kitchen. While I waited, my father appeared. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You okay? I'm fine, Dad. Marcus didn't mean anything by it. He paused, searching for words. He's proud of what he's built. Sometimes he doesn't realize how it comes across. I know. He nodded slowly. You've always been quieter, less flashy, but that doesn't mean you haven't done well for yourself. It was the closest thing to a compliment I'd gotten from him in years. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded back. My mother returned with a container of food and a small bag of rolls. She pressed them into my hands like she was sending me off to war. Drive safe. Text me when you get home. I will. And Daniel, she added, voice dropping to a near whisper, don't let what Marcus said get to you. He doesn't know everything. I looked at her, surprised. She held my gaze for a moment, then patted my arm and stepped back. I walked out to my truck, tossed the food on the passenger seat, and climbed in. The engine coughed to life, and I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at the house one last time. Through the window, I could see Marcus laughing at something on TV. Could see the warm glow of the lights, the picture of a perfect family gathering. But perfection was an illusion. It always had been. I backed out of the driveway and headed home. The apartment I lived in was nothing special. A one-bedroom unit on the third floor of a building that had seen better days. The carpet was worn, the walls were thin, and the heater rattled whenever it kicked on. But it was mine. I'd signed the lease with my own money, furnished it with second-hand finds, and turned it into a space where I could think, work and build something without anyone watching over my shoulder. I dropped the food in the fridge and collapsed onto the couch. My laptop sat on the coffee table, screen dark, surrounded by notebooks and printouts covered in my handwriting. Diagrams of system architecture, notes on client feedback, revenue projections for the next quarter. This was my real home, not my parents' house with its polished surfaces and unspoken judgments. Here. I opened the laptop and checked FreightFlow's dashboard. 3 new sign-ups today. 2 existing clients had upgraded their subscriptions. The metrics were trending upward, steady and consistent. Nothing explosive, but solid growth. The kind that built foundations. There was a message waiting in my inbox. From Marcus. The timestamp showed it had been sent about an hour ago, right around the time I left. I hesitated, then opened it. Hey man, just wanted to say, no hard feelings about tonight. You know how I get after a few drinks. Family's family. We're good, right? I stared at the words for a long time. No hard feelings, as if humiliating me in front of everyone was just a quirk, a harmless side effect of too much wine. As if the years of dismissive comments and casual cruelty could be erased with a quick apology sent from his phone while he lounged on my parents' couch. I closed the laptop without responding. Monday would come soon enough. The weekend passed in a strange, suspended state. Saturday, I worked on FreightFlow, refining features, responding to client questions, preparing for the integration with Greenway that would begin in earnest once the acquisition was public. Sunday, I went for a long run, trying to clear my head, trying to quiet the nervous energy that had been building since Thanksgiving dinner. I didn't hear from Marcus again. Didn't hear from anyone, really, except Ashley, who sent a text Saturday night. Still thinking about Thursday. You handled that better than I would have. Proud of you. I appreciated it more than I could articulate. Sent back a simple thanks and left it at that. Sunday night, I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios in my mind. How Marcus would react, what he'd say, whether he'd try to fight it, deny it, play the victim, whether the rest of the staff would see me as an interloper or an opportunity. By the time Monday morning arrived, I was exhausted but wired, running on caffeine and adrenaline. I dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual. Dark jeans, a button-down shirt, a blazer that I rarely wore but had bought for exactly this kind of moment. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. Not the warehouse worker Marcus had mocked. Someone else, someone who'd earned the right to walk into that boardroom and take control. The drive to Greenway's office took 40 minutes. The building was a sleek, modern structure on the outskirts of downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed success and innovation. I'd been here once before, years ago for that interview Marcus had mentioned. I'd walked out halfway through, realizing even then that working for him would have been unbearable. Now I was walking back in as the majority owner. I parked in the visitor lot, grabbed my bag and headed inside. The lobby was polished and professional. A receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile. I gave her my name, and she made a call, then directed me to the elevator. 3rd floor. Conference room B. I rode up in silence, watching the numbers climb. When the doors opened, Helen was waiting. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, wearing a grey suit that conveyed authority without trying too hard. We'd spoken on the phone a dozen times, but this was the first time we'd met in person. Mr. Peterson. Helen. Good to finally meet you. We shook hands. Her grip was firm. Everyone's inside. I should warn you, Marcus doesn't know yet. We thought it best to let you handle the announcement. I nodded. That's fine. She studied me for a moment, then gestured toward the conference room. After you. I walked in. The room was large, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A long table dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs. 7 people were already seated. I recognized a few from the research I'd done. Tom Bridger, VP of Operations, Sandra Lee, Head of Sales. A couple of senior consultants whose names escaped me, and at the head of the table, looking relaxed and confident, was Marcus. He glanced up when I walked in. His expression shifted from casual to confused in the span of a heartbeat. Danny, what are you doing here? I set my bag down and pulled out a chair. Sat down slowly, deliberately. I'm here for the board meeting. Marcus laughed. Nervous, uncertain. There's been some kind of mistake. This is a closed meeting. Executives only. Helen cleared her throat. Actually, Marcus, there's something we need to discuss. She opened a folder and slid a document across the table. Marcus picked it up, frowning, eyes scanning the page. I watched his face change, watched confusion turn to disbelief, disbelief turn to anger. It's the new ownership structure, I said calmly. As of last Tuesday, I acquired 68% of Greenway Solutions. The room went silent. Marcus stared at me, then at the document, then back at me. This is a joke. It's not. You can't. He stammered, struggling to form words. You don't have that kind of money. You work in a warehouse. I used to work in a warehouse. Now I run freight flow. And as of last week, I also run this company. He stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. You can't just walk in here and take over. That's not how this works. Actually, Helen interjected, voice steady, that's exactly how it works. The acquisition was legal, properly documented, and approved by the board. Mr. Peterson now holds majority control. Marcus's face flushed red. He looked around the table, searching for support, for someone to validate his outrage, but everyone avoided his gaze. You, he pointed at me, hand shaking. You did this to humiliate me. I shook my head. I did this because Greenway is a good company with a lot of potential that's being mismanaged. I'm here to fix it. Mismanaged. I built this company from the ground up. You built it, and then you let it stagnate. Client retention is down, revenue's flat. You're losing contracts to competitors with better systems. That's not true. I pulled out another document. Client turnover rates for the last 2 years. It's all here. He snatched the paper, scanned it, then threw it back on the table. So what? You swoop in, buy your way to the top, and suddenly you're the hero. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to save the jobs of everyone in this room. That got their attention. Heads turned. Helen leaned forward slightly. I continued. Greenway has value, but it needs modernization. It needs integration with systems that actually work. Freight Flow can provide that. Together we can offer clients a complete logistics solution, something nobody else in the region can match. Tom Bridger spoke up, cautious. And what happens to us? Nothing. If you don't want it to. I'm not here to fire people or slash budgets. I'm here to grow this company the right way. Marcus laughed bitterly. This is unbelievable. You of all people, the guy who couldn't even finish college, who's been scraping by for a decade, and now you think you can run a company. I met his eyes. Yeah, I do. He stared at me, jaw clenched, hands balled into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually take a swing, but he didn't. He just grabbed his jacket off the back of his chair and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Helen asked. "Out. I'm not sitting here and listening to this." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The room sat in stunned silence. Finally Sandra spoke. "So what? What?" I took a breath. Now we get to work. The conference room felt different after Marcus left, lighter somehow, despite the tension still hanging in the air like morning fog. I looked around at the faces staring back at me, some curious, some skeptical, all of them waiting to see what kind of leader had just walked through their door. Helen was the first to break the silence. She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled in front of her, studying me with the kind of careful attention that came from years of evaluating people in high-stakes situations. She'd been with Greenway since the beginning, had watched Marcus build it from a startup with 3 employees to a mid-sized firm with 42 staff members and annual revenue in the 8 figures. She'd also watched it start to crumble over the past 18 months, hemorrhaging clients and talent in equal measure. "All right," she said finally. "Let's say we're willing to hear you out. What exactly is your plan here?" I opened my laptop and pulled up the presentation I'd been working on for the past 3 weeks. The screen on the wall flickered to life, showing the FreightFlow logo alongside Greenway's integration, not elimination. I said, "FreightFlow has the technology. You have the client relationships and industry expertise. Together we can offer something neither company could provide alone." Tom Bridger, the VP of Operations, leaned forward. His hair was graying at the temples, and he had the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades putting out fires. "What kind of technology are we talking about?" I clicked to the next slide, showing a demo of FreightFlow's interface: real-time inventory tracking, automated shipping optimization, predictive analytics for supply chain disruptions. It reduces processing time by 40% and cuts shipping errors by 63%. Sandra Lee, the head of sales, raised an eyebrow. "Those are bold claims. They're backed by data from 43 active clients across 6 states. I can show you the metrics." I spent the next 20 minutes walking them through FreightFlow's capabilities, the integration roadmap, and the projected growth over the next 2 years. I showed them which Greenway clients would benefit most from the new systems, how we could pitch the upgrade, and what kind of revenue increase we could expect if we retained even 70% of the current client base. Helen asked pointed questions about costs. Tom wanted to know about implementation timelines. Sandra pushed back on some of my sales projections, pointing out market conditions I hadn't fully accounted for. These were smart people, experienced people, and they weren't going to be won over by flashy presentations and optimistic forecasts. But they were listening. That was something. After 45 minutes, Helen called for a break. People stood, stretched, refilled coffee cups. I stayed seated, reviewing my notes, feeling the weight of exhaustion starting to settle into my shoulders. Tom approached me while the others were out of earshot. He held his coffee mug with both hands, steam rising between us. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why now? Why wait until after Thanksgiving to drop this bomb? You could have announced the acquisition last week, given Marcus time to process it privately." I met his gaze. Would that have changed anything? He considered this. Probably not, but it might have been kinder. Maybe, but kindness wasn't really extended to me at that dinner table. Tom nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Look, Marcus is a decent guy in a lot of ways, but he's also got blind spots, big ones. and this company has been coasting on momentum for too long. If you can actually deliver what you're promising, I'm willing to give you a shot. I appreciate that." But he added, his voice dropping lower, "If this is just about settling a score with your brother, if you're planning to run this place into the ground out of spite, you should know that a lot of good people will get hurt. People with families, mortgages, kids in college. That's not what this is about." "Good, because I've got 3 years until retirement, and I'd like to make it there without watching everything I helped build turn to ash." He walked away before I could respond, leaving me alone with that warning echoing in my head. The meeting reconvened, and we spent another hour hammering out details. By the end, we had a tentative agreement. I would spend the next 2 weeks working on site, meeting with department heads, reviewing processes, and developing a concrete integration plan. Helen would act as my advisor, helping me navigate the company culture and avoid the landmines that came with being the new owner, who also happened to be the former owner's younger brother. As everyone filed out, Sandra hung back. She was younger than Helen and Tom, probably early 40s, with sharp features and an intensity that suggested she didn't suffer fools gladly. "Question," she said. "What happens to Marcus? He's been offered a senior consulting position. Good salary, no management responsibilities. He can take it or leave it. And if he leaves, then he leaves with a severance package and a non-compete agreement." She nodded, processing this. "You know he's going to fight this. Not legally, maybe, but he'll talk. Family gatherings, industry contacts, anyone who'll listen. He'll paint you as the villain. Let him. Just so you know what you're walking into." "I do." She studied me for another moment, then grabbed her things and headed out, leaving me alone in the conference room with Helen. Helen closed her laptop and looked at me across the table. "That went better than I expected." "What were you expecting?" "Honestly, I thought you'd come in here guns blazing, wanting to tear down everything Marcus built and put your stamp on it. Ego and revenge wrapped up in a business plan. That's not what this is. I'm starting to see that." She paused. "Can I give you some advice?" "Please. Marcus built this company, flaws and all. The people here respect that, even if they're frustrated with how things have been going lately. If you come in trying to erase his legacy, trying to prove he was wrong about everything, you'll lose them. But if you acknowledge what he did right and build on it, they'll follow you." I nodded. "That's fair. And one more thing." She stood, gathering her materials. "Whatever happened between you and Marcus at that dinner, whatever he said that pushed you to reveal this now, you need to let it go. At least when you're in this building. The staff doesn't need to be caught in the middle of a family war." "Understood." She left, and I sat there in the silence, staring at the blank presentation screen, feeling the full weight of what I'd just taken on. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. Instead, I checked into a hotel near the office, a mid-range place with clean sheets and reliable Wi-Fi. I needed to be close, needed to be ready for whatever came next. My phone had been buzzing intermittently throughout the day. Texts from Marcus, increasingly frantic and hostile. Missed calls from my mother, a voicemail from my father that I hadn't listened to yet. I turned the phone face down on the nightstand and opened my laptop. There were emails waiting. One from the investment firm, checking in on how the announcement went. Another from a freight flow client asking about new features, and one from an address I didn't recognize with the subject line, "We should talk." I opened it. "Mr. Peterson, my name is Jennifer Caldwell. I worked at Greenway until 6 months ago when I resigned due to concerns about financial irregularities I observed. I've heard through industry contacts that you've acquired the company. If you're serious about turning it around, there are things you need to know. Please call me at your earliest convenience." Below the message was a phone number and a LinkedIn profile link. I clicked the link. Jennifer Caldwell had worked as a senior accountant at Greenway for 4 years before leaving last spring. Her profile showed she'd moved to a competitor, a smaller logistics firm based in Charlotte. No explanation for the departure, just the standard professional language about seeking new challenges. I saved her contact information and made a note to call her in the morning. Then I scrolled through Marcus's texts. They followed a predictable arc. Initial confusion giving way to anger, anger giving way to accusations, accusations giving way to threats. What the hell did you do? You can't just buy a company out from under someone. This is fraud. I'm calling my lawyer. You've always been jealous. This is pathetic. Mom is devastated. Hope you're proud of yourself. Dad wants to talk to you. Call him. I'm not giving up my company without a fight. The last message had come in 20 minutes ago. I stared at it, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, just a hollow kind of exhaustion. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Same number. I answered. Daniel, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day. I know, Mom. I'm sorry. It's been busy. Busy. Her voice climbed an octave. Marcus called me in tears. He said you stole his company. He said you've been planning this for months, that you did it to humiliate him. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Because right now, your brother is sitting in our living room saying his career is over, his reputation is ruined, and it's all because of you. I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. I acquired a controlling stake in Greenway Solutions through a legal transaction. Marcus still has a position with the company, if he wants it. If he wants it. You demoted him. He wasn't demoted. He was offered a different role. Daniel, this is his company. He built it from nothing, and you just walked in and took it away from him. Mom, Greenway was failing. Client retention was down, revenue was flat, and without changes, it would have collapsed within 2 years. I'm trying to save it. She was quiet for a moment. I could hear muffled voices in the background, Marcus talking to someone, probably my father. Why didn't you tell us? She asked finally. Why didn't you tell us you were doing this? Because I knew how you'd react. We're your family. Exactly. The word hung between us, sharp and final. She sighed, a long weary sound. Your father wants to talk to you. Not tonight. Daniel, please. I said not tonight. I'll call you tomorrow. I hung up before she could argue, then turned off the phone completely. Sleep didn't come easily. I lay in the dark hotel room staring at the ceiling, replaying the day over and over. Marcus's face when he realized what had happened. Helen's measured skepticism. Tom's warning. My mother's voice on the phone, caught between her 2 sons, trying to hold together a family that had been fracturing for years. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and turned on the TV. Found a documentary about deep-sea exploration, something mindless and soothing, and let it play while I drifted in and out of consciousness. When morning finally came, I felt like I'd been awake the entire night. I showered, dressed in the same clothes I'd worn the day before, and headed to a coffee shop across the street from the office. Ordered a large black coffee and a bagel I didn't want, found a corner table, and called Jennifer Caldwell. She answered on the second ring. This is Jennifer. Hi, this is Daniel Peterson. I'm returning your email from last night. Oh, Mr. Peterson, thank you for calling. I wasn't sure if you would. You said there were things I needed to know about Greenway. There was a pause. Are you somewhere you can talk freely? I am. She took a breath. Okay. I'm going to be direct because I don't know how much time you have. When I worked at Greenway, I noticed discrepancies in the books. Nothing huge at first, just small amounts that didn't quite add up. Invoices that didn't match purchase orders. Payments to vendors I couldn't verify. I brought it up with Marcus twice. Both times he told me I was overthinking it, that everything was fine, but it wasn't fine. No. The more I dug, the more I found. Money being moved through shell accounts. Consulting fees paid to companies that didn't seem to exist. I documented everything I could, but when I tried to escalate it to the board, Marcus shut me down, said I was creating problems where there weren't any, that if I wasn't happy with how things were run, maybe I should look for opportunities elsewhere. So you left? I left because I didn't want to be there when it all came crashing down. And I didn't want my name attached to whatever investigation eventually happened. Did you keep the documentation? Copies of everything? Spreadsheets, emails, transaction records? I've been sitting on it for 6 months waiting to see what would happen. Why didn't you go to the authorities? Because I wasn't sure if what I found was actually illegal or just unethical. And because going after Marcus Harrison, well-connected business owner with a sterling reputation, seemed like a good way to end my career. But now that you own the company, maybe you can actually do something with it. Can you send me what you have? I can, but I need your word that my name stays out of it unless absolutely necessary. You have it. She was quiet for a moment. There's something else you should know. Marcus has been talking to people. Industry contacts, potential investors, anyone who might be interested in helping him start a competitor. He's positioning himself as the wronged party, the founder who was betrayed by his own brother. Some people are buying it. Let them. Just thought you should know what you're up against. I appreciate the heads up. We ended the call, and 5 minutes later, my email pinged with a message from Jennifer. The attachment was a compressed folder containing dozens of files. Spreadsheets, scanned documents, email threads, all meticulously organized and annotated. I spent the next hour reviewing it. The coffee went cold, the bagel sat untouched, and with each file I opened, the picture became clearer. Marcus had been siphoning money from Greenway for at least 3 years, not massive amounts, nothing that would trigger immediate red flags, but steady, consistent diversions. Payments to consulting firms that existed only on paper, expense reports for trips that never happened, bonuses to phantom employees whose names didn't appear anywhere else in the company records. It wasn't sophisticated. It was just brazen. And it had worked because Marcus was the founder, the face of the company, the person everyone trusted, until now. I forwarded the entire folder to Helen with a simple message: "We need to talk, today." Then I gathered my things and headed to the office. The Greenway building felt different in daylight. Busier, more alive. Employees streamed in through the main entrance, badges clipped to their belts, coffee cups in hand, conversations flowing about weekend plans and project deadlines. A few glanced at me as I walked through the lobby, recognition flickering in their eyes. Word had spread fast. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Helen was already in her office, door open, glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed something on her computer. She looked up when I knocked. "Come in. Close the door." I did. She gestured to the chair across from her desk, and I sat. "I got your email," she said. "Spent the last hour going through those files. And if even half of this is accurate, we have a serious problem." "It's accurate." I verified the vendor names. Most of them don't exist. The few that do have no record of doing business with Greenway. Helen removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "This explains a lot." The budget shortfalls Marcus kept blaming on market conditions. The cash flow issues he said were temporary. "How much are we talking about?" She pulled up a spreadsheet. "Based on what I can see here, at least 400,000 over 3 years. Maybe more if there are things Jennifer didn't catch." I leaned back in the chair, processing the number. 400,000, not enough to sink a company Greenway's size, but enough to cripple its ability to invest in growth, upgrade systems, or weather a rough quarter. "What do we do?" I asked. Helen looked at me carefully. "That depends. Do you want to handle this internally or bring in authorities?" "What's your recommendation?" "Internally, if possible. The last thing Greenway needs right now is a public scandal. Clients get nervous, employees start looking for other jobs, competitors smell blood in the water. But Marcus won't go quietly. If you confront him with this, he'll either deny everything or claim he had authorization to make those payments, and without a full forensic audit, it'll be your word against his. Then we do a forensic audit. That takes time, weeks, maybe months, and it's expensive. I don't care. If we're going to move forward, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Helen nodded slowly. All right. I'll reach out to the firm we use for this kind of work. But Daniel, she leaned forward, you need to prepare yourself for what this might mean. If Marcus did what it looks like he did, and if it becomes public, it won't just hurt him, it'll hurt your family. My family hurt me first. The words came out harder than I intended. Helen didn't flinch, just held my gaze. I understand that. But make sure this is really what you want before we go down this road. I stood. It's not about what I want, it's about what's right. She studied me for another moment, then picked up her phone. I'll make the call. I spent the rest of the morning meeting with department heads. Tom walked me through operations, showing me the warehouse management system, the client databases, the routing software that still ran on technology from a decade ago. Sandra introduced me to the sales team, a group of 6 professionals who ranged from cautiously optimistic to openly skeptical about the new ownership. By lunch, my head was spinning with information, client names, contract terms, ongoing projects, personnel issues, technology gaps. Greenway was more complex than I'd realized, more fragile in some areas and more resilient in others. I ate a sandwich at my temporary desk, a small office on the 3rd floor that had belonged to a consultant who'd left 3 months earlier. The walls were bare, except for a generic motivational poster about teamwork. The desk was clean, empty, waiting to be claimed. My phone buzzed. I'd turned it back on that morning, bracing myself for the flood of messages. Most were from family members. A few from friends who'd heard through the grapevine what had happened, and one from Marcus. Meet me at Riverside Park. 6 p.m. We need to talk face to face. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him stew in his anger and resentment, but another part, the part that remembered being kids, remembered fishing trips with our dad and late-night video game marathons, and the way Marcus used to defend me from bullies in middle school, that part thought maybe, just maybe, we could have an actual conversation. I replied, I'll be there. The afternoon crawled by. More meetings, more introductions, more systems to learn. By 5:30, I was exhausted and wired simultaneously, running on too much coffee and not enough sleep. I left the office and drove to Riverside Park, a sprawling green space along the James River where families picnicked and joggers traced the waterfront path. At 6 o'clock on a Monday in late November, it was mostly empty. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the grass. Marcus was already there, standing near a bench overlooking the water. He'd changed clothes since yesterday, now wearing jeans and a flannel shirt I recognized from years ago. He looked older somehow, tired, diminished. I approached slowly. He didn't turn around, just kept staring at the river. I wasn't sure you'd actually come, he said. You said we needed to talk. Yeah. He finally looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. Do you have any idea what you've done? I acquired a company that was failing. You stole my life's work. I saved it. He laughed, bitter and sharp. Saved it. That's what you're telling yourself. That you're the hero here. I'm not claiming to be anything. I saw an opportunity to stabilize a business that was hemorrhaging money and clients. I took it. Without telling me. Without giving me a chance to fix it myself. Would you have fixed it, Marcus? Or would you have kept coasting, kept blaming market conditions and bad luck until there was nothing left to save? He turned away. You don't know what it's like. The pressure, the constant decisions, trying to keep everyone happy, clients, employees, investors, family. You have no idea. You're right. I don't. But I know what it's like to work 60-hour weeks for years while building something from nothing. I know what it's like to be dismissed and underestimated and told I'm not good enough. And I know what it was like to sit at Thanksgiving dinner and listen to you tell everyone I'm the reason our parents can't retire. He flinched. I was drunk. That doesn't make it okay. We stood in silence. A jogger passed, earbuds in, oblivious to the tension crackling between us. Marcus spoke quietly. Mom thinks I should sue you. For what? Breach of fiduciary duty. Conflict of interest. She found some lawyer who thinks we have a case. Do you want to sue me? He didn't answer right away. No. I want to wake up and find out this was all a nightmare. I want my company back. I want my life back. I can't give you that. Then what can you give me? I took a breath. A senior consulting position, 50 hours a week if you want them, but no management responsibilities, good salary, benefits, and the chance to help rebuild what you started. He shook his head. You don't get it. I don't want to work for you. You're my little brother, the guy who needed my help, who I tried to protect, who I gave opportunities to, and now you're offering me a job at my own company. It's not your company anymore. The words landed hard. I saw them hit, saw Marcus's shoulders slump. I didn't do this to hurt you, I said. But I'm not going to apologize for succeeding. Succeeding? He turned on me, anger flashing. You call this success? Sneaking around, buying up shares, staging some corporate coup while I'm eating turkey with our family. That's not success, Danny. That's betrayal. What would you call spending 3 years embezzling money from your own company? His face went white. What? The shell companies, the fake vendors, the consulting fees to businesses that don't exist. I've seen the records, Marcus. All of them. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't. That's not $400,000, maybe more. You're making this up. I wish I was. He staggered backward, sinking onto the bench like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. His hands shook as he ran them through his hair. It wasn't like that, he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. I was going to pay it back. It was temporary. I just needed to cover some personal expenses, and the company had cash flow, and I thought, you thought no one would notice. I thought I'd fix it before anyone found out, but you didn't. No. He looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. What are you going to do? That depends on you. Meaning you can resign quietly, take a severance package, and walk away with what's left of your reputation intact. Or we can do a full forensic audit, bring everything to light, and let the chips fall where they may. You'd really do that? Destroy me like that? I'd really hold you accountable like that? He stared at me, searching my face for something. Mercy, maybe. Or the little brother who used to look up to him, who used to think Marcus could do no wrong. That person was gone. I need time to think, Marcus said. You have until Friday. After that, the auditors start their work. He nodded numbly, then stood, swaying slightly, and walked away without another word. I watched him go, watched him disappear into the growing darkness, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret. Just a quiet certainty that I'd done what needed to be done. The drive back to the hotel was a blur. I barely remembered parking, barely remembered taking the elevator to my floor. I collapsed onto the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. A text from Helen. Auditors confirmed for next week. Also, board wants to meet Thursday to discuss transition plan. Can you make it? I replied. I'll be there. Another buzz. Ashley this time. Heard about the park. Marcus called Mom crying. This is getting messy. I know. Are you okay? I stared at the question for a long time before typing back. Honestly, I don't know. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then call me if you need to talk. Anytime. Thanks. I set the phone aside and closed my eyes. Tomorrow there would be more meetings, more decisions, more fallout. But tonight, I just needed to exist in the quiet space between what I'd been and what I was becoming. Somewhere in that space, I fell asleep. Thursday morning arrived with grey skies and the promise of rain. I'd spent the last 3 days immersed in Greenway's operations, learning the rhythms of the company, understanding which clients mattered most and which employees were essential to keeping everything running. Helen had been invaluable, introducing me to key players and helping me navigate the unspoken politics that existed in every workplace. Marcus hadn't responded to my ultimatum. Friday was tomorrow, and the silence from his end felt intentional, like he was testing whether I'd actually follow through. The board meeting was scheduled for 10. I arrived early, finding the conference room empty, except for Helen, who was setting up her laptop and reviewing a thick folder of documents. "Ready for this?" she asked without looking up. "As ready as I'll ever be." The board consisted of 5 people: Helen, Tom Bridger, Sandra Lee, and 2 external advisors who'd been brought in when Greenway first started taking on outside investment. Richard Moss, a semi-retired executive with 30 years in logistics, and Patricia Chen, a venture capitalist who specialized in supply chain technology. Both had flown in specifically for this meeting. They filed in over the next 15 minutes. Handshakes, polite small talk, coffee poured from the carafe Helen had arranged. Everyone took their seats, and the room settled into an expectant quiet. I stood at the head of the table, the same spot where Marcus had stood just days ago, confident and in control. Now it was my turn. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "I know the last few days have been turbulent, and I appreciate your willingness to work through this transition with me." Richard Moss leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Let's cut to it. Daniel, you've taken control of a company in the middle of a quarter, with contracts in progress and clients who are probably nervous about the change. What's your plan to stabilize things?" I pulled up my presentation. Over the next 20 minutes, I walked them through the integration roadmap, showing how FreightFlow's technology would plug into Greenway's existing systems. I outlined the client retention strategy, the timeline for upgrading infrastructure, and the projected revenue growth over the next 18 months. Patricia asked sharp questions about burn rate and customer acquisition costs. Tom wanted reassurance that existing employees wouldn't be squeezed out by new hires. Sandra pushed back on some of my sales projections, pointing out seasonal fluctuations I'd underestimated. But by the end, there were nods around the table, not enthusiasm exactly, but cautious approval. Then Richard asked the question I'd been dreading: "What about Marcus?" The room went still. Everyone knew the answer, but no one had said it out loud yet. I took a breath. "Marcus has been offered a consulting position. He hasn't responded yet. But regardless of his decision, the company needs to move forward." Patricia frowned. "There are rumors circulating, industry chatter about financial irregularities." Helen glanced at me. I'd told her I'd handle this part. "There are concerns," I admitted. "We've engaged a forensic accounting firm to conduct a full audit. Until that's complete, I can't comment on specifics, but there is something to comment on eventually," Patricia said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes." Richard exhaled slowly. "This could get ugly. It already is ugly. But transparency is better than letting it fester." The board discussed logistics for another 30 minutes. Who would communicate what to clients, how to handle media inquiries if any came up, what the timeline looked like for the audit. By 11:30, we'd hammered out a plan that everyone could live with. As people filtered out, Patricia pulled me aside. "You're handling this well," she said. "Better than I expected, honestly. But be careful. Family and business don't mix cleanly, and when things go sideways, they go sideways fast." I appreciate the warning. I mean it. I've seen situations like this destroy companies and families, sometimes both. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything else. That afternoon, I finally called my father. I'd been avoiding it, but the conversation was inevitable, and delaying it any longer would only make things worse. He answered on the third ring. "Daniel, Dad, your mother's been beside herself. Marcus won't leave the house. This whole thing is tearing us apart." "I know. Then why are you doing it?" "Because Greenway was failing, and Marcus was stealing from it. Someone had to step in." "Stealing?" His voice rose. "That's a serious accusation. It's a factual one. There's documentation." He was quiet for a long moment. "Even if that's true, did you have to humiliate him? Did you have to take everything from him in front of everyone?" "I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine legally. And the humiliation part, that's on him. He's your brother, and he spent Thanksgiving telling everyone I was a failure, telling them I was the reason you and Mom couldn't retire. He made me into a joke in front of the whole family. So this is revenge?" "No, this is business. It's both, and you know it." "Maybe it is, but that doesn't make it wrong." My father sighed, the kind of deep, weary sound that carried decades of exhaustion. "I don't know how to fix this, Daniel. I don't know how to make this right between you two." "You can't. That's not your job." "Then what is my job?" "Be a father to both of us, not just the son who made you proud first." The line went silent. For a moment I thought he'd hung up. Then I heard him breathing, slow and measured. "You think I favored Marcus. I know you did. He was the easy one, the one who did everything right. You were always so stubborn, so determined to do things your own way even when it made life harder, and you punished me for it." "I never punished you. You ignored me. You dismissed everything I tried to do. You made it clear that nothing I accomplished would ever measure up to what Marcus did." Another long silence. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "If that's how you felt, I'm sorry. It wasn't much. It didn't erase years of feeling invisible, but it was something. I need to go. Dad, will you come for Christmas?" "I don't know yet. Your mother would like that. Even if Marcus doesn't." "I'll think about it." We hung up, and I sat there staring at my phone, feeling hollowed out and heavy at the same time. Friday came, the deadline I'd given Marcus. By noon, there was still no word from him. I checked my email obsessively, refreshed my messages every few minutes, but nothing appeared. At 2 o'clock, Helen knocked on my office door. "Marcus is here." I looked up. "Here?" "Downstairs in the lobby. He wants to talk to you." I stood, straightening my shirt, and followed Helen to the elevator. We rode down in silence. When the doors opened, I saw Marcus standing near the windows, hands in his pockets, staring out at the street. He turned when he heard us approach. He looked worse than he had at the park. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Alone?" I glanced at Helen. She nodded and stepped away, giving us space. Marcus and I walked outside. The air was cold, biting. Neither of us had grabbed coats, but neither of us seemed to care. "I'm not taking the consulting position," he said. "Okay, I can't work for you. I can't walk into that building every day, knowing it used to be mine. I understand. Do you?" He looked at me, eyes red. "Do you have any idea what this feels like?" "Actually, I do. I know what it feels like to build something from nothing and have no one believe in it. I know what it feels like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be treated like you don't matter." He flinched but didn't argue. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "Leave Richmond. Start over somewhere else. Rachel and I have been talking about moving anyway. What about the audit?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, voice barely above a whisper, "I'll cooperate. I'll give them everything they need. But I need your word that you won't press charges. That depends on what they find. Danny, please. I made mistakes. Bad ones. But I'm not a criminal. I was just trying to keep everything together, and it spiraled out of control. $400,000 didn't spiral. You took it deliberately over 3 years. I know, and I'll pay it back. However long it takes, I'll make it right. I studied his face, searching for deception, for manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion and genuine regret. If the audit confirms what I think it will, you'll sign a repayment agreement, structured over 5 years, and you'll resign with a statement saying you're stepping down for personal reasons. No scandal, no public accusations, but you're done with Greenway. He nodded slowly, and if I don't agree, then I turn everything over to the authorities and let them decide. That's not much of a choice. It's the only one you have. He looked away, jaw clenched. After a moment, he extended his hand. Deal. I shook it. His grip was weak, defeated. For what it's worth, he said, you were right. About the company. About me coasting. I knew things were falling apart, and I didn't do anything to stop it, because I didn't know how. You could have asked for help. I was too proud, thought I could fix it myself. Thought admitting I was struggling would make me look weak. It would have made you human. He almost smiled. Almost, yeah. I guess it would have. We stood there in the cold for another minute, two brothers who'd spent their lives competing, comparing, trying to prove something to each other and to themselves. And in that moment, I realized that no matter what happened next, no matter how this all resolved, we'd never have the relationship we could have had. That door had closed years ago, maybe even before Thanksgiving, and neither of us had the key to reopen it. Take care of yourself, Marcus. You too. He walked away, and I watched him disappear around the corner, knowing I'd probably never see him again. The audit took 6 weeks. The forensic accountants tore through every transaction, every invoice, every expense report from the past 5 years. What they found confirmed everything Jennifer Caldwell had documented, and then some. Marcus had taken closer to $500,000, using shell companies and fake vendors to hide the transfers. It was methodical, calculated, and completely illegal, but true to his word, Marcus cooperated fully. He provided account numbers, passwords, documentation of where the money had gone. Most of it had been used to cover personal debts, failed investments, and a lifestyle that outpaced his actual income. Some he'd gambled away, some he'd lost in the stock market. It was a portrait of someone who'd been drowning quietly, trying to maintain an image of success while everything collapsed beneath him. He signed the repayment agreement, 5 years, structured payments with interest, and he resigned with a carefully worded statement about pursuing new opportunities and spending more time with family. The local business press covered it briefly. Founder steps down from Greenway Solutions, cites personal reasons. A few people in the industry asked questions, but without scandal or drama, the story died quickly. By March, Marcus and Rachel had moved to Denver. I heard through Ashley that he'd taken a job with a small consulting firm, nothing glamorous but stable. He'd stopped calling our parents every day, stopped posting on social media, just quietly disappeared into a new life far away from Richmond. Greenway stabilized. The freight flow integration took longer than I'd projected, but by summer we were operational. Client retention exceeded expectations. Revenue grew. We hired 12 new employees, including 2 software engineers who'd been trying to get jobs at Freightflow for months. Tom Bridger made it to retirement. Sandra Lee got promoted to VP of Sales. Helen stayed on as CFO and became one of my most trusted advisors. The company wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, still clients we lost, and projects that didn't pan out. But it was solid, growing, building something sustainable. And me, I rented a better apartment, bought a newer truck, started dating someone I'd met at an industry conference, a logistics manager from Atlanta, who actually understood what I did for a living. Life moved forward. Christmas came, and I did go to my parents' house, though Marcus wasn't there. The dynamic was different, quieter, less performative. My mother hugged me longer than usual. My father asked questions about the company, real questions, not dismissive ones. Ashley cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling my drink. "You did the right thing," she said. "Doesn't always feel like it. That's how you know it was right. The easy choices don't keep you up at night." She was probably correct, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed her. By the time spring rolled around again, a full year after the acquisition, I found myself back at my parents' house for Easter. Smaller gathering this time, just immediate family and a few cousins. No Marcus, no spectacle, just a quiet meal around the same table where everything had started. My father raised his glass. "To family," he said. "And to second chances." People murmured agreement. I caught my mother's eye across the table. She smiled, small and sad, but genuine. I raised my glass and drank. Later, as I was leaving, my mother walked me to the door. "He asks about you sometimes," she said. "Marcus." I nodded but didn't respond. "I think he regrets how things ended." "He should." She touched my arm. "You both should. Mom, I'm not the one who stole from his own company. I'm not the one who publicly humiliated someone at Thanksgiving. I made hard choices, but they were the right ones." "I know." She squeezed my arm gently. "But someday, when enough time has passed, I hope you two can find a way back to each other, not as competitors or enemies, just as brothers. Maybe. Someday." But as I drove home that night, windows down, spring air rushing through the truck, I wasn't sure that day would ever come. Some wounds healed. Others just scarred over, leaving marks that never quite faded. What I did know was that I'd proven something, not to Marcus, not to my family, but to myself, that I could build something real, that I could make hard decisions and live with the consequences. That being underestimated wasn't a weakness, it was an advantage. The warehouse worker they'd all dismissed now ran a company worth $15 million and growing. The charity case, the freeloader, the brother who'd never amount to anything, I'd built something that mattered. And no one, not Marcus, not my parents, not anyone could take that away from me. 6 months later, I received an envelope in the mail, no return address, postmarked from Denver. Inside was a check for $15,000. The first installment of Marcus's repayment, right on schedule. There was no note, no explanation, just the check and a small piece of paper with a single sentence in Marcus's handwriting. "Thank you for not destroying me when you could have." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I deposited the check and filed the note away in a folder I kept in my desk drawer. Sometimes at night, when the office was empty and I was working late, I'd take out that folder and look through it. The original papers from when I'd started Freight Flow, the acquisition documents, Jennifer Caldwell's whistleblower files, and that note from Marcus. They were pieces of a story that had nearly broken me, but instead had rebuilt me into someone stronger. The kid who'd loaded trucks and been called a failure had become the man who owned the boardroom. And every time someone new asked me how I'd gotten here, how I'd built this company, I gave them the simple version. The one about hard work and good timing and smart decisions, but the real version, the true version, started at a Thanksgiving table where my brother raised his glass and told everyone I was worthless. He was wrong, and now he knew it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.